God saw how good it was, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Well, let's see where we are. It's 2 months since we had a talk on the book, The Roots of Christian Mysticism. So let's see where we are. We're on chapter 5, and we're studying the roots of Christian mysticism. And we've described mysticism as some kind of an experience, of an awareness, in some way, of the existence of God, the presence of God, some kind of an experience. That is mysticism. Now, we're talking about the roots of mysticism. So we're going way, way back to the fathers of the church, and that is the basis of this book, The Roots of Christian Mysticism. It's a compilation of the teachings of the fathers of the church, the statements of the fathers of the church, put together by this Clement, who is a professor in Paris. So we are in chapter 5. Now, chapter 5 is the human vocation. Now, what do the fathers mean by human? They mean by human the joining of body and soul, creating a person. So we are talking about the vocation, the call of this human being. What is our call? Now, this is the chapter that really gets into the very source of this, the roots of Christian mysticism. This is specifically talking about the source of mysticism. And it is the call of mankind, the call of man, the vocation of man, is to be a son of God. Now, to be a son of God, what are we talking about? Well, the conclusion is we're talking about divinization, deifying, the fact that man is called to be deified, to be made a son of God, taking it very literally. You're going to be a relative now of God. To be a relative of God, you have to be, you might say, of God. You have to be deified. Now, we are frightened to death of that word, deified. The Eastern Church, it's very, very common to talk about deification, to talk about being divinized. It's a common expression. They understand it. But we're so afraid of heresy and so afraid of the word being deified that we don't use it much. But that's what these fathers are talking about. Fundamentally, they're talking about Jesus becoming man so that man might become God. Now, we have that prayer during Advent, that Jesus became man, that he may become God. Now, the fathers, Irenaeus says that Jesus became man, Jesus, the Son of God, became man so that man could become the Son of God. So our vocation is to be a son of God. Now, let's look at 3 aspects of that, being a son of God. God created us in his image, so that we are called to be the image of God. As a son of God, you might say we're a relative of God. So therefore, just as Galatians say that Jesus is the image of the invisible God, so we can say that we are called to be an image of God. It's right there in Genesis. God created man in his image and likeness. So we are the image of God. Now, what does that mean? How does that express itself? How can we say that we are an image of God? The only way that we can say that we are an image of God is if we are divinized, if we understand that we are divinized, and we can, as the Father say, because we are sons of God, and we are the image of God, then we have to say that we have the attributes of God. And one of the first attributes of God that the Fathers talk about is incomprehensibility. God is incomprehensible. Well, isn't man incomprehensible? Who has ever figured it out, who man is and what man is? And the Fathers say that man is the joining of spirit and body. How can you join spirit and body? How can you have a soul and a body in one person? It is incomprehensible because they seem to be such opposites. How can we understand soul? No one has ever seen soul. We have never, we have no way of knowing what soul is or means. Now we can see the effect of soul. We can experience the effect of soul. But this soul now joined with body, how can we understand it? It is incomprehensible. And Irenaeus says that if we are not incomprehensible like God, then we are not the image of God. Because we are the image of God, we have the attributes of God. Everything that we say of God, we have to say of mankind. And it is all mankind, Irenaeus says, the whole of humanity that is the image of God. You might say that man is incomprehensible, but he's also huge. Mankind covers the whole of history to a period where we know when is it going to end? When is the end of mankind being mankind? If mankind is all of humanity, and all of humanity is the image of God, where is the end of it? You can almost say that it is infinite. And it is, soul and body are created to be eternal, just as God is eternal. My soul will never end. My soul is here forever. Now, this is why the Fathers talk so much about resurrection. This body of ours has to be risen, to be joined with my soul, because the soul and the body has to be together. You cannot separate body and soul. They're always meant to be together. Now, death comes in here, and it's interesting. This is a very interesting statement. They say that death is to end sin. The only way I'm going to end my sin is by dying, which is a very interesting thing for the addicts and all the poor people that have habitual, what we call them sins, but we know that they're not sins. But death is a relief from our sin. And then comes resurrection. Resurrection has to be. We have to be risen so that we will be joined again with this soul. The soul without the body is impossible to be. And that's the great wonder of the whole teaching of resurrection. Resurrection isn't just some little, some little thing that happens way in the future of our being separated from our body. It has to be right away, you might say. It's outside of time and space. So when are we back? We die, and my physical body there is in the grave. When will it be joined again, this body? Well, the fathers are saying that it has to happen because the soul has to be joined with the body. Now, it's very interesting. It only came to me last night. After reading this chapter so many times, it just came to me, my goodness, these fathers are not talking about this image and the distortion of the image that we say happens with original sin. One of the great themes of St. Bernard is the restoration of the image. We have, through sin, through original sin, we have destroyed this image of God that is within us. They're not talking about that. They don't mention it. They take for granted that you and I are the image of God, and they never say we stop being the image of God. They don't even mention original sin, and they don't even mention the fact that this image is distorted. This image has to be restored. These fathers are so close, I believe, to the life of Jesus and his death and resurrection, which was just 100 years ago, or 200 years ago. We're so close to it that they're still in the total reality that Jesus has come and saved all mankind, and he rose from the dead, and we all rose with him. The resurrection is, you might say, imminent for each one of us human beings. We're going to die. Sure, we're going to die before we know it. It's going to be there. And we are going to be, the resurrection is going to come to us immediately. It's a very interesting concept, and I wish it had come to me before last night. But it's just interesting. They do not mention that this image has been distorted by original sin, and by my sin, by sin at all. They don't even mention that. It's very interesting. We have the image of God. Now, the second part of being a son of God, according to the fathers, is to be the temple. We are the temple of Almighty God. We are a place where God can dwell. Now, if God dwells within me, something has to happen to me. And what is happening to me? I'm being divinized by the divine presence. God is within me, and from being within me, he fills every single cell of my being, of my soul and my body. He fills that completely with his divine presence, just as he fills the temple and fills every inch of a temple by his divine presence. Well, so he fills my whole being as if my whole being was a temple. It is a beautiful image that the fathers use, the temple. And the third point that the fathers, that Clement is making, he puts the fathers At the end of the chapter, he starts talking about the likeness. Not only the image, but the likeness. We're made to the likeness of God. And he says that we do not receive the likeness at the beginning of our lives because we're just children. And in this divinization process, we go from being children to an intermediate state and then maturity. We become mature, and as we mature, we become more and more in the likeness of God, which is a beautiful, beautiful image. We have this vocation, this reality, to be the sons of God, and that means we're going to be divinized, we're going to be made to the image and likeness. Well, we certainly can understand this image. We can certainly understand when they say that we have to have the attributes of God, that we have to grow. And now he says, when we reach maturity, we have the likeness of God. Now, that certainly is an interesting concept, and I don't think we hear it too often, but that's in the Fathers, that there is a growing process in our lives, that we come to maturity. And what they're saying is that when we're children, when we're young, we can't take all of God. He's too much for us. And then we have this intermediate period where I suppose we begin to be able to take him. And then finally, when we are mature, we are in the likeness of God. Now, you know, there was a time when we took very seriously, no one can see God and live. And then just the concept of our Blessed Mother taking the divine presence within herself, with the incarnate Word, the Son of God, the image of God, being present in her body. She was created in the image of God. She did not have any faults or flaws or anything in her being. She could take the image, likeness, and the whole being of God in an extraordinary way by taking within her soul and her body this incarnate Word. How was she strong enough to take that presence? Now, I think that we can say, now this is not in the Fathers, they don't talk about the Blessed Mother, but I'm just trying to make a point that our Blessed Mother was strong enough. She was made by God. Then when she was a child and she was growing, the angel came and told her that she was going to be overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit was going to come and form within her the Son of God, the incarnate Word. But when you think of it, how was she strong enough to take that reality? How could anybody take that reality, the incarnate Word within herself? Well, just think of it now, that now, you and I, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, you and I are able to relive the Last Supper and take within ourselves the incarnate Word. We go to communion and we don't faint. We should. If we ever realized what was happening to us, taking that incarnate Word within our poor little weak bodies, if we ever knew what was happening, we would just faint, I think, because it's really too much to take. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, the Pope canonized Sister Elizabeth of the Trinity. Now, I don't know if any of you know Elizabeth of the Trinity, but she was a Carmelite nun who lived at the same time as Therese of Lisieux. Elizabeth was in the convent, the Carmel convent of Dijon, France, and Therese was in Lisieux. They weren't too far apart. One is in Normandy and the other is near Paris. Well, anyway, this little girl died in 1906. She was only 26 years old, and she died. And she wrote a book, and she had a tremendous insight into the divine indwelling, which is the image of this temple. That Jesus, that the whole entire Trinity dwelled within her soul. And she would say that I shall have heaven on earth because God is heaven and God is in my soul. I just have to be in my soul and I can realize the divine presence. And she said that she would be a praise of his glory. That was her great ambition, to be a praise of glory. And she wanted to live this. She wanted to live the reality of being a praise of his glory. And I think that when you think that things have certainly developed since the fathers of the church, and we have some great saints in modern times. And one of these great saints now is Elizabeth of the Trinity, a woman who experienced this mystical reality. It was palpable to her, the fact that the Blessed Trinity dwelled within her and was within her soul. And we start off as children, and we grow, and then we come to maturity. I think it's the saints that have arrived at this maturity, this realization of what it means to have the divine Trinity within us, to be a temple, and that temple, being a temple, is God's way of divinizing us, of making us a son of God,